like WordPress.com is almost its own separate beast, and the guys at Automatic have all their own kind of custom code and custom functionality that's offered that is not necessarily available to WordPress. And Jetpack is their way of offering some of that functionality. The thing that is appealing to me about Jetpack is that the Jetpack API is that it's supported by WordPress.com, but also the documentation, because of that, the documentation is really nice.
So is the first one community driven, the second one is automatic? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So their documentation, they've just got a really good job. And this covers, most of the basic things that you would want to query, from your WordPress site, your posts, your multi-site sites, custom taxonomies, and stuff like that. So they've got some pretty great documentation. Let's talk about
on the API choices, are there any performance pitfalls that you can talk about?
So I haven't done any actual performance testing on any of these differences. I can speak from our experience. So this event calendar is a great case study for needing to cache your API results. None of the community plugins are available. I didn't see anything that was beyond just WordPress's default caching. We had to implement W3 total cache across the site and then actually tweak our plugin code for the API to pull cached objects and cache database records and all of that.
We did quite a bit. I mean, we were doing memcache, object cache, I forget what else we set up.
All the static content's being served from a CDN, and so we kind of maximized caching on this to the extreme. I think there's right now about I don't know. There's a lot of events in here, several thousand events, and we have several calls where you can run a custom search through all the events to try to match something, and so there's a lot that you go through. So right now there's 3,000 events in there that every time. Well, before we added the caching, every time a user was trying to load that on their apps, first of all, it's slower because it's going through mobile, and then just parsing all of that data at once in a list was slow too. So we did a lot of custom kind of caching implementation there. Thing that we did on this app, I'll talk about before we get into the code, is we actually built our own plugin to send push notifications to these apps. So there's just a really simple little interface here that allows the user or the admin of the site to set a weekly push message. So all their users that have the app downloaded will receive this, and that just runs on a cron. And then the same thing with event notifications. We can choose to kind of promote and call out a specific event. And tell users, hey, this event is happening today, or maybe there's ticket sales, or whatever. Hit that button and it sends. And we did all of that through a custom PHP library. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's just some open source project that handles kind of the communications between Google and Apple's push servers and authentication and stuff like that. So if anybody's interested in that, I can definitely pull it up and
Airship maybe.
No. Those are for the native apps. I don't know if they have web APIs. This is more like a really robust PHP class that somebody wrote.
Gotcha.
So, for the sake of this, I thought what might be helpful is just to go through a really basic plugin that I wrote just to basically query your post list and query individual post details by themselves. So I guess I can just jump into that. Yeah, oh yeah, sorry. Isn't there a presentation mode?
Hit Command Plus.
That works. Is that good for you guys, or do we need to go bigger?
That's good.
Okay. So in the main just declaration file for the plugin, you've got your standard info. The hook that we're going into is called parse request. I actually spent like maybe a full day just kind of looking up the best way to write kind of like an endpoint to just be able to on the fly intercept when someone hits your API URL. I found parse request is the one. If you look up the documentation, there is literally 2 lines saying this is an action hook. So it was really hidden. It took me a while to find it, so I'd recommend to anybody who's interested in this using that hook because that makes it really easy to, you don't have to do any custom htaccess rewrites or things like that. This is just going to intercept the request as it comes in. So with that said, we basically grab the parameter, the arguments that come in, parse them, check to see if the first value that's in that array matches API, so that's going to be the first part of my endpoint. And then I've got my different, and then I'm going to do some other checks. For this plugin, I just wrote it to only accept GET requests. But when you get into that, you're now talking about setting up authentication through OAuth and stuff like that, and that's to me was a little too much to try to get into for this talk. In my opinion, like authentication is probably the most complex part of this whole process if you're going to go that route. So this plugin is just going to work for us doing basic reads from the database. So I've kind of broken everything out here into as much sensible structure as I can. So I have my exceptions class, which is just going to declare a couple of exceptions. We've got a utility file that's just going to manage when there's errors parsing JSON and give me specific messages and feedback on the errors that might happen there. I've got kind of this main class API call that's going to serve as kind of a reusable wrapper for any of my other calls that I want to build. It's just going to do some basic initialization. My get call is going to extend that API call class and then handle getting the responses and statuses. So I include all those files and then parse any of the arguments that are coming in through the URL call. Nice, just try and catch for determining what endpoint is being hit. So right now I just have defined 2. So there's, let's see, I've got a demo set up here. So this is my demo site that I've got this plugin installed on right now. My endpoint is going to be /API/blog/listing. So that's going to be one that will return my list. When it does that, it instantiates that class and then does all of the querying from there. And then blog detail call, do the same thing. If I send something that is not an actual call, I'm going to get a proper error. Most of the code in here, I think, is probably error handling. It's important. So I'd emphasize doing that. Especially one of the things that I can share with our experience and then integrating this API into a mobile app is it's really hard and painful to deal with undescriptive errors or at least error statuses at the minimum. If you're not getting back good error statuses in your mobile app and knowing what happened to the data, it's really hard to make the app either not crash or just respond properly based on what it was. If it's a 500 error, you might need to retry the call based on whatever it is. You're going to need to do different things. So I would really emphasize putting in the extra 10 minutes writing your exception handling. And that's from a mobile developer perspective, which I've been on both ends of the equation.
Similar to App Presser, I met Brian at the Web Dev Studios guy, and I guess he's got Broken and App and all that. Are they just doing the same thing?
He's a
They're
speaker at WordCamp.
just, yeah, are they just
Yeah.
hiding it from us? And then,
I'm sure probably, yeah.
yeah.
You know,
It's
they're
getting really popular. There's that application Happy Tables. The whole thing was built on WordPress, but even if you're a client and you're paying the monthly fee, you get an interface, an admin interface that's just using one of the API solutions. You know.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're taking a similar approach, because I think in order to first you have to pay for the an account for the service, and then I think you do just install some of their proprietary plugins.
It generates the iOS side of things, and it just does probably the JSON queries that you showed us. Okay.
I've heard that only like 90% of apps don't have any help or support built in. Have you done anything like that, or
Apps is
like if you're using apps, like if you have a problem with the app, like if you're on a website or an application, you hit support or hit help. All there are is like the contact us. So if maybe you've got a problem looking up, or maybe it's to add events or something with that site that you did. Is there anything like that helps people know what to do?
Yeah, so it kind of, we took the standard approach there. So like inside of the iOS app here, there's kind of an informational section. So in the menu here, there's about standard terms of use and stuff. So some basic information about Rack. I don't know why my simulator is being really unresponsive. Down here, there's a contact Rack button. If I push, it's going to shoot an email right to their contacts, to their whoever their contact person is. That's a good question though. We have integrated our own kind of ticketing system. So when we're building the apps, we'll integrate a mobile plugin from Atlassian that feeds, lets people submit bug reports directly into our ticketing system. And so we do that internally because it helps us when we're QA and testing things to immediately just report an error and submit it. It does like screen grabs, and it grabs data about the phone, the OS, and all that stuff. It saves a lot of work for the user. We haven't actually deployed it on once we've published the site or the app. We haven't left it on there because we're too kind of scared to be getting, unless we've signed an enormous support contract to handle any request that comes in. It's not feasible for us to.
I wouldn't so much like from a development standpoint, but how to post a video, or how to create a new event, or when I was at the Salesforce as a app development kit also, and I was shocked how few apps have support built in.
Yeah, we did work with them on their website because they have constituents that submit these events. We did work with them somewhere on the site where we've shared kind of resources about how to use this system to submit your events. I honestly don't know if I remember where it is, but it is in the site, and so people that are required in some cases to upload events, they've got help. Yeah, I mean, I can say one of the really appealing things about building your own API to return that data is you're not stuck within a web shell, right? Your native app is only receiving text, basically, and so that allows us, like one of our apps, for St. Louis. Here it is. So this app here is kind of like a event, a business like directory listing thing for people who are coming to visit St. Louis and want to find out what's going on. All of this content is coming in through WordPress, However, we can leverage the native app to do really nice graphic, really robust, fancy graphics, high resolution, and then you're not transferring this thing over the wire, so it performs really well.
These apps are, I mean, the native ones you're talking about, they're mostly using it as a read
Yeah.
resource.
Yeah, we've played around with kind of doing like a CRM type thing through WordPress, and then having a native app that is a manager for the CRM and that stuff. We didn't get too far. I mean, a lot of what was holding that back was the authentication stuff. So now that they're making
Gotcha.
progress with OAuth integration and stuff like that, hopefully it'll be much easier to do. Because you want to have authentication for those types of things.
Yeah, or some sort of gating.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I would argue that there's a lot of instances where you just want to make sure that it's just not junk coming in. But
Exactly.
you also don't want them to have to create a WordPress account.
Right. Yeah.
So we actually built a system for a client that you've got 2 levels of API servers behind the scenes. So you're talking JSON and REST between those server calls. So WordPress is acting as the front end for the administrators who are running the system. It's the source of truth for all of the user database because there are great plugins for hooking into LDAP and other user sources. And then that dealt with mailing lists and sending stuff out. So there's SendPress, I think we used for stuff for that. And then the mobile app was talking to either WordPress or one of the other API servers doing JSON. So that when you log into the mobile app to start logging, kind of a little bit like Foursquare, but not quite. All of those events that are, the user authentication, the sign in, the sign up stuff on the mobile is hitting services in WordPress, going into the WordPress database. So you've got WordPress users. So now if they come to the web, you've got single sign-on. Their account is in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes a lot of sense to build these services in on the WordPress because now when you do come to the actual website part of it, everything's there.
That's
And
nice.
the other thing is, eat your own dog food. If you're going to use those APIs mobile, build the front end for the WordPress to talk to your APIs, not just hack it as a quick query. And then whoever's going to then maybe build that mobile app would thank you in the long run because they can get everything they need as well. As you're building it out. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a huge enabler though to be able to put it in as an API like this.
Yeah, and really the appeal, the only reason why we ever played around with building our own API for this stuff is because our clients love WordPress, and they when you talk to them about the effort and the cost that it'll go into not having a dynamic app where you can feed data to it, and you need to make changes. You want slider images to update remotely. When you say you can put it into WordPress for them, they're just excited versus saying, oh well, we actually need to build a custom app, a web app for you to manage that content. Now you've got to manage content in 2 places, and you get on a vicious cycle. One of the things I'll add too, with rolling your own, it's really nice too because you can, you have full flexibility of the data that you return back through the app.
If you were doing Java API server, just thinking in terms of the cost and the way up of why would you use WordPress, roll your own, all the rest of this stuff. 5-minute install, you're getting, and you've got yourself your PHP is on there, you've got WordPress on there, you've got something that's already directing traffic, you've got Apache, you've got MySQL, you have all of the stuff lined out. If you were doing that on sort of the traditional Java enterprise app, the install process, getting the app server up and running, getting all these other pieces of moving parts into play, this is a much lower cost option to get yourself up and rolling with an API server compared with the other alternatives. So this is a big win if you're looking at a cost-effective method of getting into the API business.
Well, yeah, you just look at how the adoption of WordPress has boomed in the last few years, and all the things that keep getting pushed further and further with what WordPress can do. And this is next in line, so it's going to open a whole new box for people that do stuff with WordPress.
So if they put it in core, it's gonna be similar to RSS feeds, where if you just restructure the URL to pull the same data, and it's just structured differently. So it's not-
Well, right, and what our RSS feed is actually XML, so it's
Yeah, so it's just a different URL structure. Here, we're just using, we're swapping out some
Right.
URL
Well, and with-
hijacking or.
yeah, and in RSS, the only thing that it's capable of is doing reads. So anytime you're talking about making an interactive application with WordPress as the core, you've got to have that ability to post and edit and read data.
So
that's
you-
what it really is.
So who's actually written anything with the admin Ajax endpoints? You know how much of a pain in the
Yeah,
ass
it's a
that
pain in the
is?
butt.
Yeah,
Total pain in the butt. This is
Almost
just the
easier.
dream in comparison.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
seems to be.
I mean, I guess it depends on what you're trying to do. Like, I've tried to write database calls just in other applications that don't have some type of platform that you're using. So, like, the fact that WordPress had, the Ajax admin stuff was like a godsend whenever I was, doing things another way. But,
Yeah, but if you can just install that
Oh, yeah.
plugin, or it's already built in, and you know that you can just hit points to get your data, it's going to be even easier.
yeah. Because essentially that's what I had to do was, the way we did it for another project here, where all I did was created template pages that supplied particular pieces of JSON data, and then we just hit those template pages whenever we needed something.
Yeah.
I think we also discussed putting just like a piece of get data, or just a get parameter at the end of the URL, that would switch the theme dynamically based on what you're trying to get out of it. But all that was built in core, so much
Other questions?
It's a long.
What's it feel like being a badass, guys?
That's a question for you to answer.
Come back for part 2 of the iOS side and Android.
Yeah, if you want to get into mobile development, I'd be more than glad to talk about that. But yeah, so I guess the only other thing before we leave is maybe just have some consensus about what our next meetup will be about.
Other WordPress questions that people have? You
Yeah,
always come with
start with
questions?
that.